My cheating wife's betrayal destroyed me. Until I got revenge. Simon Blackwood had always considered himself a fortunate man. His life was the picture of success, a thriving law practice, a luxurious home in the heart of the city, and a woman who, at least to the outside world, was the embodiment of devotion. He had built his life like a carefully structured case, with logic, ambition, and precision ensuring that nothing was ever left to chance. Tonight was no different. The scent of expensive cologne clung to his suit as he stepped out of his office, the marble floors gleaming under the soft glow of recessed lighting. His assistant had already left for the evening, the quiet hum of the city filtering through the glass windows. Simon adjusted his cufflinks, his reflection in the glass staring back at him, a man of control, of calculated power. He had planned everything meticulously. The reservation at L'Atelier, one of the most exclusive restaurants in town. The bouquet of deep red roses resting in the passenger seat of his sleek black Mercedes. The engraved bracelet tucked inside a velvet box, a small but significant token of his love for Emily. She would love it. She always did. As he navigated the streets, the city pulsed with its usual energy, cars rushing past, the distant wail of a siren cutting through the night, neon signs flickering with life. He had always been drawn to the order within the chaos, the way he could carve out a life of control in a world that thrived on unpredictability. By the time he pulled into the driveway of their townhouse, the air was thick with the scent of autumn, crisp leaves, a faint trace of wood smoke lingering in the distance. He stepped out of the car, taking a moment to glance up at the large bay windows of their home. Light spilled out onto the cobblestone path leading to the front door, warm and inviting. He smiled. This was what he had built. This was his world. Stepping inside, he was greeted by the rich aroma of candle wax and something delicate, lavender perhaps. The dining room was bathed in golden light, a table set for two with fine china and crystal glasses. A bottle of wine stood uncorked, breathing. Soft jazz hummed from the speakers, filling the room with an air of quiet intimacy. And then there she was, Emily Blackwood. She stood near the dining table, her silhouette framed by the glow of candlelight. She wore a deep emerald dress that clung to her figure in all the right places, her blonde hair cascading in soft waves down her back. When she turned to face him, her lips curled into a slow smile, her green eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Happy anniversary," she murmured. Simon stepped closer, lifting the bouquet of roses between them. "Happy anniversary, my love." She took the flowers, bringing them to her nose, inhaling deeply. But there was something distant in her expression, a flicker of something beneath the surface. A hesitation. He might have dismissed it if not for the way her hands trembled slightly as she set the roses down. "Dinner smells amazing," he said, brushing the unease aside. He had spent years perfecting the art of reading people. Witnesses, clients, judges, but Emily had always been the one mystery he never wanted to solve. She poured the wine, her fingers tightening around the stem of the glass as she passed it to him. "To us," she said, raising her own. Simon held her gaze as he clinked his glass against hers. "To us." The wine was smooth, the kind that lingered on the tongue, leaving behind a trace of something bittersweet. They talked about work, about plans for the future, about everything and nothing at all. But beneath the surface, something shifted. A pause before answering question. A fleeting glance at her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. The way she smiled just a little too perfectly, like a woman trying too hard to maintain an illusion. It was subtle, but Simon noticed. And for the first time in their marriage, a cold whisper of doubt slithered through his mind. He ignored it. He wanted to believe in the life they had built in the woman sitting across from him. But some part of him, buried deep where instinct overpowered love, knew. The cracks had already begun to form. And soon, everything would shatter. The night the illusion shattered was an ordinary one. Simon had been sitting in his leather armchair, a glass of whiskey cradled in his palm, the soft hum of jazz filling the dimly lit living room. The scent of Emily's vanilla perfume still lingered in the air from when she had kissed him goodbye, claiming she had a late meeting. A lie. He didn't know it then, not for certain. But the unease had started to crawl beneath his skin, an invisible pressure tightening around his chest. It was the little things that had begun to nag at him, whispering suspicions he had tried to ignore. The way she had been more protective of her phone lately, how she smiled less when he spoke, the way her fingers hesitated before touching him, as if she were afraid of what intimacy might reveal. He told himself he was imagining it, that he was paranoid, until her phone, forgotten on the kitchen counter, buzzed. Simon had never been the type to pry. He trusted Emily, believed in the sacred privacy between a husband and wife. But trust is a fragile thing, and when it begins to crack, it doesn't shatter. It erodes piece by piece until all that's left is dust. His eyes flicked to the screen. A name he didn't recognize. A message that sent ice through his veins. Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again, my love. For a moment, Simon felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, just silence. A stillness so profound that it pressed into his ears, dulling the sound of his own breath. Then the world snapped back in motion. His fingers clenched around the phone, and his heartbeat roared in his ears. He hesitated. He could put it down, pretend he hadn't seen it, go back to sipping his whiskey, go back to believing in the lie. But something dark unfurled inside him. He swiped the screen open. The first message was just the tip of the blade. What followed was an avalanche of filth, words drenched in desire, in secrets, in a history he had been blind to. There were dates, plans, whispers of stolen moments, pictures, a hotel room receipt, an entire hidden life unfolding in front of him, every message a fresh wound. Emily's laughter drifted from the doorway. Simon barely had time to register it before she stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. She looked radiant, as she always did. Her coat was draped over her arm, her hair spilling over her shoulders in soft waves. She smiled, but there was something tired in it, forced. "Hey, love," she said, her voice smooth, warm, a voice he had fallen in love with, a voice now laced with deception. She kissed his cheek as she passed, her lips grazing his skin with the same tenderness she had surely given him. Simon forced himself to breathe, to keep the storm contained. "How was your meeting?" he asked, his voice steady. Emily sighed, tossing her coat onto the chair. "Exhausting. We went over projections for next quarter. I think we'll have to make some adjustments." A flawless lie. She moved to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water, completely unaware that the walls were caving in. Simon looked at her, really looked at her, the way she ran a hand through her hair absent-mindedly, the way she leaned against the counter, her body language so at ease, as if she weren't living two lives. And in that moment, he understood something chillingly simple. She wasn't just betraying him. She had mastered the art of it. A hollow laugh almost escaped him. How long had he been blind? How many nights had he kissed her goodnight while another man's scent clung to her skin? How many times had she smiled at him with lips that had whispered devotion to someone else? Emily turned, meeting his gaze. "You okay?" Simon smiled, a slow, careful smile. "Of course." And just like that, the game had begun. Simon's world had always been built on logic and order. In the courtroom, every case he handled had a clear beginning, a middle, and an inevitable end. But this was chaos. A storm of betrayal ripping through the foundation of his life, turning everything he thought he knew into a carefully constructed lie. He sat alone in his dimly lit study, staring at Emily's phone in his hand, the screen still glowing from the last message he had read. His breath came in slow, deliberate exhales, though his pulse hammered violently against his ribcage. He had seen the words. They could never be unseen. "Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait to see you again, my love." Simon's hands clenched into fists. The woman he had built a life with, the woman he had sworn to protect, was deceiving him. And not just any kind of betrayal. This was calculated, deliberate. This was the kind of treachery that stripped a man of his dignity. But he didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he watched. That night, as Emily emerged from the shower, wrapped in a silk robe, she smiled at him as if nothing had changed. "You look deep in thought," she said, walking toward him. The scent of lavender and vanilla clung to her skin, the same scent he had loved for years. Simon forced a small smile. "Just work." She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss against his cheek, and for the first time in their marriage, Simon felt nothing. No warmth, no love, just cold calculation. The next morning, when Emily left for work, Simon stayed home. He called in sick, something he never did. As soon as she was gone, he sat at his desk, fingers drumming against the wood. He had two choices: confront her and demand an explanation, or dig deeper, uncover the full extent of her betrayal before striking. The latter was the only acceptable option. Simon hired a private investigator that afternoon. His name was James Mercer, a former detective with a reputation for uncovering the darkest secrets. He didn't ask questions when Simon handed him Emily's photo and the name of her suspected lover. "Richard Calloway," Simon said, the name burning on his tongue. Mercer smirked. "I've dealt with this type before. Give me a few days." And so, Simon waited. At home, he became a ghost, moving through the house like an unseen specter, silently observing Emily. He noticed things he had never paid attention to before. The way she lingered in the bathroom texting, the way she seemed more distant, the faint smile that played on her lips when she thought he wasn't looking. At night, he pretended to sleep while she lay beside him, scrolling through her phone with an expression of quiet longing. It was rage unlike anything he had ever known. But he swallowed it down, forced his face into a mask of indifference. He needed proof. He needed certainty. And then, 3 days later, Mercer called. "Meet me in person," was all he said. They met in a discreet cafe downtown, away from prying eyes. Mercer slid a manila envelope across the table, his expression unreadable. "Take a deep breath before you open it," he advised. Simon ignored him, his fingers tearing through the envelope with precise efficiency. And then, there it was, photographic evidence of his wife's treachery. The first image, Emily stepping into the lobby of the Montclair Hotel. The second, Richard Calloway waiting for her at the bar, a smug grin on his face. The third, the two of them in the elevator, Emily's fingers grazing his arm, her head tilted toward him in intimate conversation. And the final image, the one that made Simon's blood run ice cold. Emily and Richard in a dimly lit hotel room, the door still ajar, her dress slipping from her shoulders. Simon's hands shook. He pressed his knuckles into the table, inhaling deeply through his nose. The cafe buzzed around him, voices, laughter, the clinking of cups, but it all felt distant like background noise in a film. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice dangerously calm. Mercer leaned back. They've been meeting for months. Always the same routine: hotel rooms, late-night calls, secret rendezvous. She's careful, but not careful enough. He paused. "I don't know what you want to do with this information, but if you're looking for advice." "I'm not." Simon's eyes met Mercer's, dark and unyielding. "I know exactly what I'm going to do." As he walked out of the cafe, the weight of his next move settled over him. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about revenge. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the Blackwood estate, its warmth betraying the ice in Simon's veins. He sat at the dining table, stirring his coffee with a deliberate rhythm, his mind a battlefield of rage and calculation. Across from him, Emily sipped her tea, her delicate fingers wrapped around the porcelain cup as if nothing had changed. She looked radiant, almost angelic, and it disgusted him. She didn't know he had seen the messages. She didn't know he had hired a private investigator to follow her, to capture every stolen glance, every secret rendezvous, every time she had lain in the arms of another man. And yet, here she was, acting the devoted wife, the picture of innocence. Simon lifted his coffee to his lips, allowing the bitterness to settle on his tongue. It was fitting, really. Bitterness. Deception. A slow, burning poison. "Anything interesting at work today?" Emily asked casually, buttering a piece of toast. Her voice was soft, melodic, practiced. Simon smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "Nothing unusual," he said, taking another sip. "Just the same old routine." Routine. Yes, that's what it had been. A carefully orchestrated routine of lies. She left for work early, claimed late nights at the office, weekend conferences, a tight schedule flawlessly executed. She had perfected the art of deception. But so had he. Simon leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "And you?" he asked. "Busy day?" Emily hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Most wouldn't have noticed it, but Simon did. She smiled, bright, effortless. "Oh, the usual. Meetings. Reports. Probably a late one tonight." A masterpiece of falsehood. Simon nodded, as if he believed her. As if the scent of another man wasn't clinging to her skin. As if he hadn't spent last night staring at photographs of her wrapped in Richard Calloway's arms. Instead of rage, he felt something colder, sharper. Control. The rage had been overwhelming at first, a firestorm threatening to consume him whole. But now was something else. Now was strategy. And Emily had no idea she was playing a game she could not win. He reached across the table, gently brushing his fingers against hers. She looked up, startled, but quickly masked it with a soft smile. "I hope you don't work too late," Simon said, his voice smooth. "I was thinking we could have a nice dinner. Just the two of us." For the briefest moment, he saw panic flicker in her eyes. Trapped. But then, she recovered. "That sounds lovely," she said. "I'll let you know if I can make it." She wouldn't make it. She would send a last-minute excuse, a sudden meeting, an unexpected delay, and then she would rush to her lover, completely unaware that every move she made was already mapped out, accounted for, controlled. Simon finished his coffee, placed his cup down with precision, and smiled at his wife. "I'll be waiting," he said. Emily returned the smile, but there was a tightness in her expression, a hesitation she couldn't quite hide. She felt something, a shift in the air. Good. Let the doubt creep in. Let the cracks begin to form. Simon stood, adjusting his tie, and leaned down to press a lingering kiss against Emily's cheek. He felt her flinch, so slight, so imperceptible, but he noticed. "Oh," he murmured. "I almost forgot." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily's breath hitched as he placed it in front of her. "A little something for you," he said. She hesitated before opening it, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate diamond bracelet, elegant, expensive, flawless. Her lips parted, and for a moment, she looked genuinely touched. "Simon, it's beautiful," she whispered. Simon tilted his head, studying her. "Just a reminder," he said softly, "that I see you." A flicker of something, guilt, fear, crossed her face. Simon leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "And that I always will." She shivered. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks, and gave her one last smile before heading toward the door. As he walked away, he didn't turn back. Because he had already won. Simon sat in his car outside the Blackthorn, a bar that reeked of whiskey, desperation, and secrets. It was the kind of place where men came to drown their regrets and strike deals in the shadows. He exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel before stepping out. Inside, the dim glow of flickering neon lights barely cut through the haze of cigarette smoke. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and spilled liquor. A slow jazz tune played from the crackling speakers, muffled beneath the murmurs of patrons hunched over their drinks. Simon spotted him immediately. Damien Wolfe. The man lounged in a booth at the far end of the bar, sipping from a glass of scotch, his sharp eyes cutting through the dimness like a predator surveying his territory. Dressed in a fitted black suit with his sleeves rolled up to reveal faded scars, Damien exuded danger, charm, and an unshakable calm that made men either fear or admire him. Simon approached. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, a flicker of recognition passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the past. Damien smirked. Well, look what the devil dragged in. Simon slid into the seat across from him, his jaw tight. I need your help. Damien swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Help? That's a big word, my friend, and a dangerous one. Simon leaned forward, his voice cold and deliberate. Emily is cheating on me. Damien arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Women cheat. It's what they do. You didn't call me after all these years just to cry into your drink, did you? Simon didn't flinch. I want revenge. Now he had Damien's attention. The smirk faded, replaced by something darker, something calculative. He set his glass down with a slow, deliberate motion. Revenge? That's a dangerous game. What are you thinking? Simon clenched his fists. I don't just want to hurt them. I want to destroy them. Damien studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the man in front of him. He'd known Simon years ago, back when they were two ambitious law students who saw the world as theirs for the taking. But time had turned them into different men. Tell me everything, Damien finally said, signaling the bartender for another round. Simon laid it all out. The secret texts, the photos, the betrayal that had hollowed him out from the inside. He spoke in a measured tone, but the fury beneath his words was unmistakable. When he finished, Damien chuckled softly. Cold. Calculated. You really want to burn them, don't you? Simon's stare was unwavering. To the ground. Damien exhaled, rolling his shoulders. All right. First rule of revenge. Don't act on emotion. Emotion makes you sloppy. You want to get even, you do it smart. Precise. Simon nodded. Which is why I came to you. A slow grin spread across Damien's face. He tapped his fingers on the table. Then let's make them bleed. The deal was struck. The night was just beginning. The night air was crisp as Simon stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, staring at the city below. Neon lights flickered, car horns blared in the distance, and somewhere far beneath him, life carried on as usual. But not for Emily, not for Richard. Their lives were about to unravel, thread by delicate thread. He exhaled slowly, gripping the glass of bourbon in his hand. Revenge wasn't just about striking once. It was about erosion, the slow, painful unraveling of everything his betrayers held dear. And the first step was making Emily doubt her own reality. Simon started small. Emily had always been meticulous about order, a creature of habit. She placed her jewelry box on the left side of the dresser, always arranged her skincare bottles in height order, and never left her shoes out of place. He knew her patterns better than she did. So he shifted things, just enough to unsettle her. Her perfume bottle moved to the opposite side of the vanity. A pair of heels that had been neatly tucked away in the closet now sat in the middle of the room. Her phone charger, always plugged in by her bedside, disappeared for a night before mysteriously reappearing in the kitchen drawer. At first, she brushed it off. A tired mind, a fleeting lapse in memory. Then, Simon escalated. She was obsessed with her phone, always clutching it like a lifeline. So one night, while she slept, he took it and sent a message to himself from her number. Just a single word. Help. Then he deleted it from her sent messages. The next morning, as they sat at breakfast, he casually picked up his phone and frowned. Emily, did you text me last night? She looked up from her coffee, blinking. No. Why? Simon turned his screen toward her. The message glowed ominously. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. She took her phone and checked her messages, her brow furrowing. That's weird. I don't remember sending that. He tilted his head. Maybe you were sleep texting. She forced a laugh, but he saw the unease in her eyes. She was starting to question herself. Good. The nights became longer for Emily. Sleep evaded her. The paranoia creeping into her bones. One evening, as she showered, Simon dimmed the lights in the bedroom and left the closet door ajar. When she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, she froze. He saw it, the hesitation, the quick glance over her shoulder. "Did you go into the closet?" she asked, her voice tight. He looked up from his book, feigning confusion. "No, why?" She swallowed, shaking her head. "Nothing. I just never mind." She was unraveling. While Emily descended into self-doubt, Simon turned his attention to the man who had ruined his marriage. Richard Calloway was a smooth-talking investment broker with a reputation built on charm and carefully crafted lies. But Simon knew the truth. He knew about the unpaid debts, the offshore accounts, the whispered rumors of insider trading. And now he had proof. Thanks to Damien, Simon had acquired financial records showing Richard's involvement in fraudulent deals. His empire was built on a house of cards, and Simon was about to blow. A single email, sent anonymously, reached Richard's firm's board of directors. The subject line read, "Urgent. Evidence of Calloway's fraudulent activities." Attached were documents detailing secret transactions, emails proving misconduct, and just enough truth to send his entire career into a nosedive. Within hours, Richard's office erupted in chaos. Simon received a text from Damien. "It's happening. He's fucked." Simon smiled. That evening, Emily was different, distracted, fidgety. As they sat on the couch watching TV, she kept glancing at her phone, chewing her lip. "What's wrong?" Simon asked, feigning concern. She hesitated. "It's just Richard." A slow burn of satisfaction curled inside Simon, but he kept his face neutral. "What about him?" She hesitated. "Something's going on at his firm. Some kind of financial scandal. He's freaking out." Simon sipped his bourbon. "That's unfortunate." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to read something on his face. Then she shook her head, turning her attention back to her phone. Simon leaned back, satisfaction washing over him. It had begun, and he was just getting started. Richard Calloway stood in his glass-walled office, staring at the city skyline. The world stretched before him in a sea of opportunity, but for the first time in years, he felt an unease he couldn't name. His phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. He let it ring. A second later, an email alert popped up. His breath hitched as he read the subject line, "Urgent. Investigation into financial irregularities." His stomach twisted. Clicking it open, he found a message from a supposed whistleblower within his company. Attached was a confidential report detailing discrepancies in his firm's accounts, false invoices, missing funds, unaccounted transactions. His own transactions, the kind that, if exposed, could end his career. A cold sweat prickled his forehead. Richard deleted the email and grabbed his coat. He needed air. From across the street, Simon Blackwood watched. Hidden beneath a cafe awning, he sipped his black coffee, savoring the moment. Richard didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Simon had spent weeks feeding anonymous tips to journalists, planting doubt among Richard's colleagues, and ensuring his name whispered through the corridors of power, always with a stain attached. He had learned one thing about men like Richard. Their downfall wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was slow, insidious, like poison slipping through the bloodstream. And now it was spreading. By midday, Richard was bombarded with phone calls. Investors demanding explanations. Partners reconsidering their deals. His assistant, normally cool and professional, had a tremor in her voice when she knocked on his office door. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "there's someone here to see you." "Who?" She swallowed. "James Holloway." Richard's breath stilled. James was a senior board member, one of the few men in the company whose approval mattered. If he was here, something was very, very wrong. Richard straightened his tie and forced a smile. "Send him in." James entered, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room. He sat down without a word. Then, he slid a folder across the desk. Richard hesitated before opening it. The contents sent a chill through his spine. Transaction records. Fake companies. Wire transfers leading offshore. His secrets. I don't know what this is, Richard said, masking his panic. James tilted his head, studying him like a snake watching its prey. We received an anonymous tip this morning, he said coolly. It appears someone has been misusing company funds. And the trail, he leaned forward, leads straight to you. Richard felt his world tilting. You don't believe this bullshit, do you? James merely smiled. I think you need to prepare yourself. Because if this is true, we won't just be severing ties with you. We'll be making an example out of you. And with that, he stood and walked out. Richard's hands shook as he clenched the folder. Who the hell was doing this to him? And then it hit him. That evening, after a stiff drink and hours of denial, Richard sat in his penthouse, staring at his reflection in the window. He had enemies, sure, but only one man had the intelligence, the patience, and the venom to pull something like this off. Simon Blackwood. Richard sneered. He had stolen Simon's wife, humiliated him, reduced him to nothing. And yet, somehow, Simon was fighting back. He underestimated him. That was a mistake. Richard reached for his phone and dialed Emily. She answered on the second ring, her voice wary. Richard, did you tell your husband about us? He demanded. What? No. Why would I? Because someone is trying to ruin me. Emily. His voice was sharp, and I think your husband is behind it. Silence. A long, dreadful silence. Then, finally, Emily spoke. I think, she whispered, he knows. From a hidden number, Simon listened. He had tapped Richard's phone weeks ago, knowing paranoia would eventually set in. As Richard raged, as Emily stammered, Simon closed his eyes and let their fear wash over him like a warm tide. He had them exactly where he wanted them. And the next move? Will be checkmate. The hotel room reeked of cheap perfume and desperation. Empty wine glasses littered the nightstand. A crumpled silk dress lay discarded on the floor, and the air between Emily and Richard had turned sour with unspoken resentments. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, her slender fingers clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. The words on the screen blurred as she read them again, her pulse hammering in her throat. Your lover is a fraud. Run before he takes you down with him. Her heart pounded. An anonymous message. The third one this week. She had ignored the first two, dismissing them as some sick joke. But after everything that had been happening lately, the strange looks at work, Richard's recent paranoia, the sudden loss of his biggest client, she wasn't so sure anymore. She turned to Richard, who was sprawled on the bed, half-dressed, cigarette in hand. He exuded the same arrogance that had once drawn her to him, but now, in the dim glow of the bedside lamp, she saw something else beneath it. Something hollow, something desperate. She cleared her throat, trying to keep her voice steady. Richard, we need to talk. His dark eyes flicked toward her, barely concealing his irritation. Christ, Em, can't it wait? He took another drag of his cigarette, exhaling slowly. No, she snapped, gripping the phone. Who the hell is sending me these messages? What is this about? Richard sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I don't know, he muttered. Probably Simon. At the sound of her husband's name, Emily stiffened. The idea that Simon could know, that he was orchestrating something from the shadows, made her stomach twist with unease. But no, that wasn't possible. Simon was oblivious, still playing the role of the doting husband. He had no reason to suspect anything. Unless... She suddenly remembered the way he had kissed her before work that morning. Longer than usual, slower, as if savoring something. Her chest tightened. She stood up abruptly, pacing the room. Richard, tell me the truth, she demanded. Are you hiding something from me? Richard scoffed, standing and grabbing his dress shirt from the floor. Don't start, Emily. Her nails dug into her palms. Start what? Asking questions? Trying to understand why the walls are closing in on us. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I know something's wrong. You're losing clients. Your company is under investigation. There are whispers about you at the firm. Richard's jaw clenched. He turned away, buttoning his shirt. It's business. It's complicated. Emily let out a bitter laugh. Complicated? Jesus, Richard, I put everything on the line for you. I betrayed my husband. I lied to my friends. Her voice broke. She swallowed hard. And now you're keeping secrets from me? Richard's eyes flashed with something dark. Oh, that's rich, Emily. You want to talk about betrayal? He let out a harsh laugh. You had no problem sneaking around behind Simon's back when it suited you. But now that you feel the heat, you're suddenly the victim? Emily's breath hitched. A slow, simmering rage built in her chest. This is different, she hissed. Is it? Richard took a step forward, his voice low and venomous. Face it, Emily, we're both snakes. We used each other to get what we wanted. And now that things are falling apart, you're looking for someone to blame. Her face burned with fury. I risked everything for you. Richard smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. And maybe that was your first mistake. Something inside Emily snapped. She grabbed the nearest glass from the nightstand and hurled it at him. It shattered against the wall, missing his head by inches. Go to hell, she spat, her breath ragged. Richard's lips curled into a cruel smile. Already there, darling. And guess what? You're right here with me. Emily's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. She realized, with sickening clarity, that the man she had destroyed her marriage for was just as deceitful, just as heartless as she had been. And now they were both sinking. As she stormed toward the door, Richard's voice followed her like a shadow. Where are you going, Emily? She hesitated. Running back to Simon, he taunted. Think he'll take you back with open arms? He chuckled darkly. He's not as stupid as you think. Emily didn't answer. She grabbed her coat, yanked open the door, and stepped into the cold night air. Her hands trembled. Her mind raced. For the first time, she wondered if the real mistake hadn't been betraying Simon, but underestimating him. Simon sat in his dimly lit study, the glow of his laptop casting long shadows across the mahogany desk. The air was thick with the scent of aged whiskey and burning wood from the fireplace. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. The time had come for the next act in his masterpiece of vengeance. Emily had spent months believing she was in control, weaving her web of lies, thinking he remained oblivious. But now, she would taste the bitter poison of betrayal, not from a lover, but from the husband she had underestimated. He opened a secure messaging app and typed a message. Had a wonderful time last night, Simon. When can I see you again? The name on the account was Catherine, a woman who did not exist. Simon had spent days crafting the perfect digital illusion. Burner phone numbers, fake social media accounts, even a few carefully staged photos of himself at a restaurant with a blurred figure in the background. Everything had to feel authentic. He pressed send. Then he waited. That evening, Emily arrived home later than usual. Simon could hear the soft clatter of her heels on the marble floor as she stepped inside. He remained seated in the study, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, watching the fire flicker and dance. Simon, Emily's voice was hesitant. He turned slowly, greeting her with the same warm, practiced smile that had fooled her for weeks. Hey, love, how was your day? Emily hesitated. Fine, she said, but there was something in her eyes, an unease she was trying to suppress. Simon leaned back, watching her closely. He knew what was coming. I need to ask you something, she finally said, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. Simon raised an eyebrow, feigning curiosity. Of course. Emily hesitated again, then took out her phone and turned the screen toward him. The message from Catherine was displayed in bold letters. Simon leaned forward, squinting slightly, as if surprised. What's this? That's what I'd like to know. Her voice trembled, but she tried to sound composed. Who the hell is Catherine? Simon chuckled softly, shaking his head. I have no idea. Emily's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me, Simon. The irony of her words sent a thrill through him. You think I'm lying? He asked, his tone calm, but with a hint of something darker beneath it. Emily exhaled sharply, pacing the room. You've been distant lately, staying late at work. I've seen the calls on your phone, the late-night messages. Simon tilted his head. Interesting. He rose to his feet, closing the space between them. You don't trust me? Emily scoffed. Don't turn this on me. Simon let out a soft, amused breath. It's just funny, that's all. He took another sip of whiskey, eyes locked on hers. The way you accuse me so easily. Emily flinched. I know what I saw. Simon set down his glass with deliberate slowness. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and handed it to her. Go on, he said. Check everything. She hesitated. Look through my calls, my texts, my emails, he continued, his voice smooth and unwavering. See if you find anything. Emily took the phone but barely glanced at the screen before lowering it. Simon stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. What if I told you someone was trying to manipulate you? Her lips parted slightly, her breath shallow. What if someone wanted you to doubt me? He leaned in, letting the suggestion curl around her like a vice. To distract you, to make you question everything. Emily swallowed. Who would do that? Simon tilted his head, feigning deep thought. Then, as if a realization had struck him, he let a slow smirk creep across his face. What about Richard? Her body stiffened. Simon chuckled softly. It makes sense, doesn't it? He's the one whose life is unraveling. Maybe he wants to drag you down with him. Maybe he thinks turning you against me will give him some kind of leverage. Emily's face paled. The cracks in her confidence deepened. She didn't trust Richard anymore. Not after the mess Simon had orchestrated in the previous weeks. He had planted just enough doubt to poison their relationship. She hesitated, glancing at the message again. Simon reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You know me, Emily, he murmured. Would I ever betray you? The question lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Emily lowered her gaze, shoulders slumping. No, she whispered. Simon smiled. Victory. Good, he said, taking back his phone and pocketing it. Now, let's not let baseless accusations ruin our evening. He poured her a glass of wine, placing it in her trembling hands. As she took a sip, Simon watched her closely, relishing the moment. She had no idea. She had no idea that this was only the beginning. Simon sat in his study, the dim glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled together as he stared at the phone on his desk. Tonight was the night. The night Emily Blackwood's world would collapse in on itself, just as she had done to him. He had spent weeks orchestrating this moment, weaving deception as precisely as a spider spinning its web. Every detail was in place, every move calculated. Now, all that remained was to watch her fall. With a slow, deliberate breath, he picked up his phone and sent the message that would deliver the final blow. To Emily Blackwood, you should know what it feels like to be deceived, to be used, to be played. Then, he sent the attachments, pictures, voice recordings, carefully crafted messages. They painted a picture of Simon wrapped in a torrid affair, entangled in the arms of another woman. A fabrication, of course, but Emily didn't need to know that. A minute passed, then another. His phone buzzed. Emily, what the hell is this? Simon smirked. He could almost hear the panic in her voice, the desperation clawing at her throat. Emily, tell me this is a joke. He let her stew in the silence. Then, just as expected, the call came. He answered after the second ring, keeping his voice perfectly composed. Emily. Who is she? Her voice was raw with anger. Simon frowned, feigning confusion. Who is who? Don't play games with me, Simon, she screamed. These messages, the pictures. Who the hell is she? He allowed a pause, a long, deliberate silence. Then, in the coldest voice he had ever used, he said, Why do you care, Emily? Her breath hitched. Simon continued, his voice smooth and controlled. I mean, you didn't seem too concerned about our marriage when you were sneaking around with Richard. Why the sudden outrage now? The line went silent. He could hear only the faint, shaky inhale of her breath. I, she stammered. I don't know what you're talking about. Simon chuckled, low and mocking. Come on, Emily. Don't insult me. I know everything. She exhaled sharply. Simon, please. It wasn't. It didn't mean. Save it. He cut her off, his voice ice cold. I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. He imagined her standing in their bedroom, hands trembling, face pale, her perfect world crumbling beneath her feet. Then, in a small, broken voice, she whispered, Do you love her? Simon almost laughed. The sheer irony of the question was absurd. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he let his silence be her answer. Emily inhaled sharply, as if she'd been stabbed. You bastard. There it was. The fury, the bitterness, the taste of her own betrayal, fed back to her in full measure. You are my wife, Emily, Simon said, his voice like a blade. And you threw it all away. She let out a strangled sob. Simon, please, we can fix this. No, he said flatly. You can't fix something you've already destroyed. She tried again, her voice desperate. I'll end it with Richard. Right now. I'll do whatever it takes. Simon smirked. Now you beg? Now you repent? He leaned forward, his tone venomous. You don't get to rewrite history, Emily. You don't get to undo your choices just because you don't like the consequences. Simon, please, she whispered. But he had heard enough. He ended the call. And just like that, Emily Blackwood was alone in the ruins of her own making. The night was thick with humidity, the air clinging to Simon's skin as he stepped out of his black sedan. A storm brewed in the distance, the occasional flicker of lightning illuminating the horizon. He inhaled deeply, savoring the moment, the scent of rain, the electric anticipation of what was to come. The abandoned warehouse loomed before him, its broken windows like vacant eyes staring into the night. Inside, the trap was set. Richard Calloway had been lured here with a single message from an anonymous sender. Come alone. We need to talk. I can fix this. Of course, Richard had taken the bait. Desperate men always did. Simon didn't enter the building. He didn't need to. He had a perfect vantage point from across the lot, hidden in the shadows. Damien had ensured everything was in place. The men inside, hardened enforcers with no patience for debtors, weren't there for conversation. A sleek black car pulled up, its tires crunching against gravel. Richard stepped out, his suit wrinkled, his tie undone. He looked gaunt, the stress of his ruined career weighing on him. His eyes darted around nervously as he entered the building. Simon smirked. Showtime. Inside the warehouse, the air was stale with the scent of oil and rust. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting eerie shadows on the cracked concrete floor. Richard walked deeper into the space, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. A voice emerged from the darkness. Calloway. Richard spun around just as three men stepped into the light. They were rough-looking, their expressions unreadable. The leader, a burly man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, cracked his knuckles. You owe our boss a lot of money, the man said casually. Richard's throat bobbed as he swallowed. I just need more time. I can get it. Scarface chuckled. See, that's the problem. You've run out of time. The first punch landed hard, a brutal right hook to Richard's ribs. He crumpled, gasping for air. Another fist connected with his jaw, snapping his head back. Blood dripped from his split lip as he staggered to his feet. Simon watched through a high, shattered window, his heart steady, his breath slow. This is what you deserve, Richard. But then, something unexpected happened. Emily's voice. Stop. Simon tensed. She stood in the warehouse entrance, her face pale, her hair wild from the wind. She had followed Richard. Damn it. Scarface turned, amused. And who the hell are you? Emily hesitated, realizing too late she had no plan, no power in this situation. Just leave him alone. He'll pay you. Scarface chuckled. Oh, he'll pay, all right. He motioned to his men. Take her too. Richard tried to intervene, but a boot to his stomach sent him sprawling. Emily barely had time to scream before rough hands grabbed her. She struggled, kicking and clawing, but it was useless. Simon clenched his jaw. He had wanted Emily to suffer, but not like this. He exhaled sharply, stepped back into the shadows, and pulled out his phone. Time for one last move. He dialed Damien. Get them out, he ordered. Within moments, another set of headlights cut through the night as Damien's men stormed the warehouse. A few gunshots rang out, a warning, not a kill, and the enforcer scattered. Richard lay groaning on the ground. Emily was on her knees, trembling, mascara streaking down her face. Simon didn't move until the warehouse was empty. Then, slowly, he stepped inside. Emily looked up, and when she saw him, realization dawned. It was you, she whispered. Simon tilted his head. You figure that out now. Her breath hitched. Why? He crouched beside her, tilting her chin up with 2 fingers. His voice was soft, almost tender. You took everything from me, Emily. His grip tightened. Did you really think I wouldn't take it back? Tears welled in her eyes. Please. Simon let go and stood. He looked down at Richard, who could barely lift his head. A pathetic sight. I could finish this, Simon murmured, mostly to himself. But as he looked at them, his betrayers broken, ruined, he realized something. He had already won. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving them in the darkness. The morning after the night of reckoning, the city awoke to whispers of scandal. A brutal attack, a disgraced businessman, a missing woman, the perfect storm of destruction, and Simon Blackwood had orchestrated every piece of it with precision. Sitting at his desk, he scrolled through the news on his tablet. The headline made his lips curl into a satisfied smirk. Prominent CEO Richard Calloway hospitalized after brutal attack. Police investigate possible criminal ties. Simon tapped the article. The details were scarce, but the message was clear. Richard had been found in a downtown alley, bloodied and broken. The assault was being investigated, but given Richard's long history of shady dealings, the authorities suspected he had simply crossed the wrong people. Simon knew better. Damien Wolfe had handled it with his usual efficiency. A few well-placed calls, a debt collector with a grudge, and Richard's downfall had unfolded just as planned. But there was another detail that interested Simon more than Richard's hospitalization. Emily was missing. No calls, no messages, no trace of her at home or her usual haunts. She had vanished. He wasn't surprised. She had nothing left. Her reputation in ruins, her lover destroyed. Simon had left her just enough breadcrumbs to realize she had been played, that her whole world had been unraveled by the man she had betrayed. She had thought she was in control, that she could juggle deception like a skilled performer. But Simon had flipped the script. Now, she was just another casualty in a game she had never been prepared to play. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The feeling should have been triumphant, but a hollow weight settled in his chest. He had won, but at what cost? A knock at the door pulled Simon from his thoughts. His assistant, Rachel, stepped in hesitantly. There's someone here to see you, she said, her voice uncertain. A woman. Simon frowned. Who? She won't give her name, but she looks... Rachel hesitated. Broken. Simon's stomach tightened. He already knew who it was. Send her in, he said coolly. Rachel disappeared, and moments later, Emily stepped through the door. She was a ghost of the woman she had once been. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed, dark circles hollowing her face. She looked thinner, as if she hadn't eaten or slept in days. Simon, she breathed, her voice raw. He stared at her, unmoving. Emily. She took a shaky step forward. I need to talk to you. Simon gestured to the chair in front of his desk, but she hesitated. Instead, she dropped to her knees. I know what you did, she whispered. Everything. You set me up. You destroyed Richard. His face remained expressionless. Did I? Her lips trembled. Please, Simon. I have nothing left. Simon studied her for a long moment. This woman, the same one who had laughed behind his back, who had whispered lies in his ear while sleeping in another man's bed, was now begging him for mercy. He should have felt satisfaction. But instead, he felt nothing at all. He stood, walking slowly around the desk, stopping just inches from where she knelt. You had everything, he said, his voice a quiet storm. A husband who loved you, a life people envied, and you threw it away. Tears streamed down her face. I made a mistake. No, he corrected. You made a choice. She sobbed, gripping the edge of his suit. Tell me what to do. How do I fix this? Simon exhaled. He reached down, pried her fingers off him, and stepped back. You don't, he said simply. A choked sob left her throat. There's no fixing what's broken, he continued. No undoing what's done. Emily shook her head frantically. Please. Simon cut her off with a single look. The only thing left for you now, he said, his voice like ice, is to disappear. She stilled, his words sinking in. And then, finally, she understood. This was the end. She had lost. Completely. She staggered to her feet, swaying slightly, as if the weight of her mistakes was crushing her. Without another word, she turned and walked out of his office. Simon watched her go, feeling neither regret nor relief. Only finality. The war was over. And he had won. The dim glow of the streetlights flickered as Simon pulled his car into the abandoned waterfront lot. A thick fog rolled in from the river, wrapping the world in a ghostly haze. He stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath his polished shoes the only sound breaking the silence. Emily stood a few feet away, shivering despite the warm night. She was a shell of the woman he had once loved. Her once perfect hair hung in tangled waves, her eyes rimmed with dark circles. She clutched her coat tightly around her, as if it could shield her from the consequences of her own choices. Simon, her voice cracked as she took a hesitant step forward. Thank you for coming. He didn't respond. He simply studied her, his face unreadable, his hands resting in the pockets of his tailored coat. She swallowed hard. I know you hate me, and I don't blame you. Simon tilted his head slightly, intrigued. No, he said, his voice smooth as glass. You don't. Emily let out a shaky breath, her fingers trembling. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. But you, she hesitated, her lip quivering. You destroyed me. Simon allowed a soft chuckle, devoid of warmth. I didn't destroy you, Emily. He took a slow step toward her. You destroyed yourself. I simply held up a mirror. Tears welled in her eyes, but he felt nothing, not even a flicker of pity. I thought I loved him, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard, he made me feel alive. Wanted. Her breath hitched. But he wasn't you. He never was. Simon arched a brow, unimpressed. A convenient realization, now that he's ruined. Emily flinched, shame twisting her features. I was wrong, she whispered. I was stupid and selfish, and I lost everything. My job, my reputation. My family won't even look at me. She looked up at him with desperate, pleading eyes. But losing you? That's the worst part. Simon let her words hang in the cold night air. Once they might have meant something. Once he might have reached for her, held her, forgiven her. But that man was gone. You were my greatest love, he murmured, stepping closer. For a moment, a flicker of hope danced across her face. Then his lips curved into a slow, cruel smile. And my greatest lesson. The color drained from her cheeks. Simon, please. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single object, his wedding ring. For a moment, he simply stared at it, the silver band glinting under the streetlights. Then, without another word, he tossed it into the river. It vanished beneath the dark waves without a sound, swallowed whole by the abyss. Emily let out a strangled sob, covering her mouth with shaking fingers. Simon turned away, walking back toward his car without looking back. "Goodbye, Emily." The door shut behind him with a soft click. The engine purred to life, headlights cutting through the mist as he drove away, leaving her standing alone in the dark. The city stretched before Simon like an empire waiting to be conquered. The skyline, bathed in the golden glow of dawn, shimmered against the glass walls of his office. He stood by the window, fingers wrapped around a tumbler of whiskey, not out of habit, but as a quiet celebration. A slow, satisfied sip burned down his throat, warming him from the inside. It was over. Richard Calloway was finished, his reputation buried under scandal, his body broken by the very men he owed. Emily, well, Emily was a ghost now. Disgraced, abandoned, and exiled from the world she once ruled with charm and deception. The last he heard, she had fled the city, a shell of the woman she used to be. Simon exhaled deeply, watching the traffic move like veins pulsing through the heart of downtown. He had won. He had outmaneuvered them all. Yet, beneath the satisfaction, something else lurked, an emptiness he hadn't anticipated. For months, his life had revolved around revenge, each step meticulously calculated, each move executed with precision. Now that it was done, he found himself standing at the edge of victory, staring into the unknown. He had torn apart the life he once had, dismantled the love that had betrayed him, and buried the man who had been too trusting. What now? The shrill ring of his office phone snapped him from his thoughts. He let it go to voicemail. He already knew who it was. Damien Wolfe. His accomplice. His enforcer. The man who had whispered the darkest possibilities into his ear and made them real. Simon wasn't interested in another conversation. Their business was done. The past belonged to the dead. He walked to his desk, setting the whiskey down as he reached for a small envelope, one he had retrieved from his desk drawer just hours before. It was crisp, unopened, with his name scrawled across the front in Emily's delicate handwriting, the last remnant of their story. For a moment, he considered throwing it away unread. But curiosity was a cruel thing. He unfolded the letter. "Simon, you always had a way of seeing through me, of knowing when I was lying. But did you ever stop to wonder why? You were never the only one playing a game. Perhaps, in another life, we would have destroyed the world together, rather than each other. Goodbye, my love." A cold chuckle escaped his lips. Even in her final words, she remained a riddle. A ghost whispering from the ruins. Simon folded the letter and placed it back in the drawer. The past had given him its last breath. Now it was time to move forward. He picked up his phone, dialing a number, one that belonged to no one from his past, but someone from his future. A business partner, a new venture. As the call connected, he turned toward the sunrise, the first true light he had seen in months. "Let's get started," he said, his voice steady. And with that, Simon Blackwood stepped into his next chapter, one written in his own terms, in his own blood, and without a single trace of regret.